Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hope you're doing well. We are continuing our reading of this radical feminist book, The Sexual Revolution. And I've disagreed with quite a lot of what she has said, and I hope that I have given proper solutions and refutations to her stances and theories. So, let us continue upon that vein. Let's begin. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Sexual revolution does not require, Bismillah, men and boys to hate themselves. Shame and self-hate are not useful emotions. Yes, they are. If you hate yourself for committing evil, that's a useful emotion. If you feel shame because you slept with married men and ruined homes as a prostitute, yes, you should feel shame. A feminist telling you not to feel shame is evil. They don't make you a better person, or a better partner, or a better man. If you have no shame, do as you wish. Isn't that a common saying in Islam? Which is telling you, like, no, you should have haya. You should have bashfulness. You should have shyness. There are 7 billion human souls skulking around this planet, and it is vanishingly unlikely that you or I are either the best or worst of them. In fact, most often than not, hating yourself gets in the way of exactly the sort of rapid, positive change that species need right now. Everyone has met individuals so enamored of their own self-loathing that it's impossible to talk to them about small, everyday human mistakes. Individuals so invested in thinking they are better people that they are unable to become better ones. Well, there's a balance, right? A balance, no doubt. But men, as a political class, are not too fragile to cope with the consequence of their actions. It is not a kindness to have low expectations of men. I don't think we have low expectations. If you see those interviews where they're talking to women on the street, they're like, he has to be 6 foot something. He has to make 6 figures. He has to drive this kind of car. He has to pay all my bills and blah 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 blah. And he has to be hung like a horse. And you're like, you're really just piling on the conditions, aren't you? So, I'd say we have high standards today. Or to always be doing the emotional work for them. It is not a kindness to give in to the threat, so common in abusive relationships that if we don't do what they want, they will do violence to themselves or to us or both. Sorry, but there's tons of women who do the exact same. I'm gonna hurt myself if you don't do that. Like women slap on men, key their cars, stab their tires. I mean, I've never heard a man say he'll hurt himself. Right? That's not really that. That's more of a feminine thing. The slicing up of your body, the self-harm cutting. It's more of a woman thing from my knowledge. For a long time, I thought that I was being loving to men by expecting less of them. I thought wrong. I was not being loving. I was not being kind. I was only being nice, and nice is not enough. There's a savage self-loathing at the core of so many of our paradigms of masculinity. Most of the men I know who have hurt women feel deep shame. I thought she just said shame wasn't good. So if they hurt women, they should feel shame. Make up your mind. You just said, we don't require men to hate themselves and have shame. That is not useful. But then now you're saying, well, they hurt women, so they should feel deep shame. Including about the women they've hurt. Sexual violence becomes a way of displacing that shame into someone else's body. That shame, the idea that men don't do bad things, that men are bad things, doesn't come from feminism. It comes from patriarchy. Oh, please. What are you Patriarchy does not say men are inherently bad, because it literally puts them in power. Why would men logically put bad men into power? Obviously, men, humans, can do bad things, but they are in charge of women. You see what I'm saying? She's insane. And fear of being found out is the center of that shame. It's not as if most men and boys don't know that there are problems with the way they sometimes behave. It is not as if most men and boys don't feel bad about it. The problem comes when you convince yourself that feeling bad is enough. No, but it's part of the healing process. Meanwhile, women and girls are managing men's rehabilitation for them and suffering in the process. So do men not deal with the psychotic nature of when some women are on their period? Some husbands, they don't leave their bipolar wives. If a man has a woman with OCD, PTSD, and she's bipolar, she's insane. So lots of men deal with women who go to rehab for their drug problems or whatnot. But women don't have to deal with that now. You know, women and girls are doing the emotional labor of talking men through their difficult feelings about the violence they have done. So you tell men, go to therapy, and there are female therapists, and you say, we need more mental health care. Okay, what do they do in mental health care? They talk about difficult feelings and help people to realize the violence they've done. So if a man's wife helps him to get through his issues, that's emotional labor and bad. So you want wives, not to do emotional labor, but women will say, he doesn't fulfill my emotional needs, so I cheated on him. You see how she's crazy? Often these women and girls have suffered violence themselves, and yet when it happened to us, there was no such support system. We were told implicitly or explicitly to keep quiet or face the consequences. Nobody was worried about the effect on our mental health of being shut out of communities or having our experience invalidated. I've learned a lot she just invalidated men by saying that if you talk to them, try to help them and get through the suffering process, that you are doing some type of chore of emotional labor. I learned a lot doing that. I've learned that there are men who truly, honestly don't know what they've done wrong and don't know what to do now. And their plan, guilt and shame, is visceral. But just because they are in pain does not mean that the process we're collectively going through is unjust. Justice is not synonymous with coddling men's discomfort. Well, I agree with that, right? You know. Or women's discomfort, actually. Justice doesn't have anything to do with coddling. In recent decades, as the idea of men's rights to rule at home and in public life has become more and more rickety, new justifications have to be found. If history can no longer be hammered around the shape of their shame, people search for other ways to explain their own behavior. One permission slip that patriarchy loves to give itself is the appeal to nature, specifically to a particular idea of evolutionary biology that owes more to magical thinking than it does to scientific rigor. Male dominance is meant to be a manifestation of natural selection. Oh, now she's mad at religion, and now she's mad at the Darwin boys. And our word culture and evolutionary advantage. Men and boys are simply born violent and selfish, and if God didn't make them that way, nature did. Okay, so she contends men are born violent and selfish. Abortion is an act of violence. Millions of women every year abort their own children. It's a violent, bloody thing where a human soul is ended. Think about that. You're gonna sit here and tell me that in women's prisons where there's tons of violence, that women aren't violent? Oh my goodness. Just follow Twitter the X like fight clips pages, and you'll see lots of women being very violent. And the selfish ones, look at the gold diggers. they all have plans about how they can extract a lifestyle from a man with giving very little. They teach their acolytes, their disciples, how you can get the most out of men with giving the least. Right? It's a whole manipulation game with them. And they get pretty good at it, you know? So don't pretend that women aren't selfish. Solipsism, women being solipsistic, is something that I've started looking into, and I think we mamas do have sometimes that element to us. It's a survival strategy. Self-preservation can border into selfishness. This approach to interpreting evolutionary science is known as sociobiology or biological determinism. It's a simple, seductive theory that has passed into folk wisdom. Right now, the marketplace for ideas is in freefall, full of shady short traders and rotten loans. Biological determinism is a convenient way of laundering shoddy ideas and sending them back to the market. In this hectic understanding of masculinity, men are simply animals. Well, hold up. So she hates religion. She's made it clear she doesn't like Christianity. And if she don't like Christianity, she certainly ain't gonna like Judaism and Islam. Because those are religions that have men as very important figures. Because all prophets are men. Okay? And the animalistic angle is pushed by the secular liberal atheists. So we're just animals. And they use that for actually the sexual revolution argument. They look at bonobos and chimps and be like, yeah, they're just humping all day, you know, so we're just animals, it's natural. And you're like, shall we look at everything else in nature before we start using the nature argument? Because that can get pretty squirrely. I'm a nature buff, and let me tell you, this nature is scary. The animal kingdom, the insect kingdom, is pretty scary. Testosterone-driven beasts, following laws of nature that play out in patterns remarkably similar to the laws of late capitalism. She really hates capitalism. Take what you want and screw the other guy. It's a simple story that hallucinates. A world of heroism and hierarchy, where every possible moral or ethical conundrum resolves itself into a fight-kill strategy. Again, it's puzzling that more men aren't offended by the assumption that possession of a male organ, I'm going to say, automatically cripples a person's ethical capacity. Perhaps it's because animals are allowed to be innocent. Animals are allowed to act on instinct. So, the instinct impulsivity argument, allowing nature to take the fall for what culture did, offers moral cowards an intellectual justification for abandoning personal responsibility. So this is an interesting angle here. So nature taking the fall for what culture did. So here we can say culture versus nature, which gets into nature versus nurture. And then nurturing and culture. Young men in particular seem oddly eager to claim to be no better than animals when it suits them. Sociobiological arguments are recruited to explain away all sorts of gendered injustices. From inequality in the paid workplace, men have larger brains and are therefore more intelligent, to modern beauty standards, women are designed by nature to appeal to men sexually. Yeah, they are, I'd argue. So, beauty standards. Alright. Obesity. Cellulite. A gut. Morbid obesity. So there's obesity and then there's morbid obesity. Okay. Allure. Sensuality. Mate selection. So, the funny part about this rabid, purple-haired feminist, she literally is that, with a very masculine haircut, who isn't very beautiful, I'd argue. Her saying, like, we shouldn't have to appeal to men's desires. Whereas, if you look at some of the disciples of the gold diggers, they'll tell you that men are visual creatures, and that you have to switch up your look with them, and you have to take care of yourself. You gotta watch your weight. You know, they actually tell you that you should understand the male mind, and men like beauty. And you should appeal to that if you want the most from men, right? So she's kind of denying that. She's like basically saying, no, just be a fat sea cow. Have a stinky mouth, don't shave your legs, have hairy armpits, don't wash your hair, and do free bleeding, and you'll be alright. Because you're supposed to reject the patriarchy. So is she trying to contend that lesbians don't want a beautiful wife? I mean, there's the butches, but do gay men not want attractive twinks? If you look at those really popular gay influencers, they're very in shape, and they try to be like Abercrombie and Fitch models. So I don't know any culture that values morbid obesity, except for that Buddha statue, where it's like the chubby guy and you rub his fat belly, right? But if you just study men's, or like if they did a study of men's erections and what body types made them stimulated, you have chubby chasers who like thunder thighs, and there's a difference between being thick and curvy to being just plain fat, you know. If you did a study, you would see that the women who get picked, it's usually about the body. Like, I recall some women where I was thinking, like, they are not very pretty, but they're very in shape. And their husbands are fine with that. Their faces are a 5, but their bodies are nice. And then I would see women who, their faces is okay, but they're very blessed up top. And then that was enough. And if you're blessed up top and you have a little bit of a tummy, men let you get away with it. But if you have a smaller chest and your stomach sticks out farther than your chest, and you don't have a booty, you go down. So if you just look empirically, you'll be like, that's interesting. And she is a big proponent of adult entertainment. And there are niches of every category, sadly, but the predominant women who become the most famous are usually slender, they have to work out, they put makeup on, and they try to appeal to men sexually, especially the OF women who want the most amount of simps to fund their lifestyle. So, you know, what's going on here? So simps, let's put simps. So she's saying, you know, modern beauty standards don't have to appeal to men. So notice how she wants to shame the, let us say, alpha, assertive, heterosexual, religious man, the kind that she hates. You shouldn't try to appeal to him, but let's frame this, if an escort wants to appeal to the beauty standards of her simps, this type of feminist would probably be like, you go girl, get your cash. You see the hypocrisy? So if you want to lose weight to make your husband happy, she thinks you're bad. But if you want to lose weight in order to get more simps to fund your OnlyFans, you're a smart, savvy, empowered boss businesswoman. You see? Very strange individual, I must say. Which is why it's important for them to maintain an ideal waist-to-hip ratio. Scientists like Cordelia Fine have painstakingly explained why, contrary to the view that the brains of men and women are strikingly different, none of these differences were particularly substantial, even for the very largest. The overlap between the sexes meant that about 1 in 5 women are more male-like than the average male. Say, what? Explain that male-like. Maybe it's the testosterone injection. Ah. The theory of evolution by means of natural selection is a rich, complex, and beautiful hypothesis, but one thing it isn't and never has been is a moral argument of any kind. Oh, so it's beautiful. But I thought you just didn't like that. You're like, biological determinism, evolutionary psychology, it's very bad. From the start, though, people have tried to squash it into shape of one. Darwin himself got the chance to look at the emergence of the theory of eugenics. The argument that unfit human specimens should be prevented from breeding and turned away in disgust. I think we do a natural form of eugenics. I mean, if you purposely pick someone who's deformed and decide to breed with them, knowing that you're passing that on to your children, I find that to be quite odd. So, you have to be careful. If you have a sickly farm animal, you don't breed them. Eugenics is in the food supply. You know? Humans have been doing eugenics with animals for a long time. Hunting dogs, horses, chickens, cattle, sheep, goats, koi fish. You look at it, you select the best for breeding, and then you neuter and spay the ones that are not fit. You know, studs are a form of eugenics. You know, the argument that unfit human specimens should be prevented from breeding and turned away in disgust, and yet no petty neo-masculinist pop philosophers and YouTube televangelists routinely invoke Darwin's theories to legitimize bigotry, a misreading that insults both men and the method. She said, neo-masculinist? That's the first time I've heard that used with pop philosophers. Very strange. It's not that there are no facts under the morass of evolutionary mysticism. It's not that there is no solid research, that there are no plausible theories in there. But these crisp slices of genuine scientific inquiry are battered in the heavy crumb of convenient fictions, deep fried in received wisdom and smothered in the special sauce of popular prejudice. This is making me hungry. Deep fried, smothered in sauce. Chicken. Prejudice so that they're easier to swallow for those who already have their mouths full of comforting lies, comforting chicken nugget lies. That stuff isn't good for you. Eventually it settles in around your heart. Stop talking about food, coronary heart disease. The notion that the natural inclination of the male mind and the male human animal is towards dominance, violence, and sadism is nothing but propaganda. Okay, so she contends it's not in men's natures to want to dominate. I mean, come on. Come on. Women are totally capable of sadism. I was just watching a documentary about the women after World War II who worked in the concentration camps who were executed for the crimes they committed in the concentration camps when they were guards. And those women were complete sadists. What they did to the prisoners under their control was a form of sadism. They were violent and they wanted to dominate the other women in the camps. How about that? Essentialism, look it up. What happened after World War II? Women, type in the keywords, women, former SS soldiers, executed women. You'll see it. Maybe I shared the channel on my documentaries playlist, so you can go there and click on it. But I've been deep diving into that. Just look it up. Women who ran the Nazi camps. Alright, and some of them were like, and they were sentenced to death for what they did, because it was obviously so bad. So, will she talk about women's propensity towards violence and sadism? No. Women, they are just little fairies who do no wrong. Essentialism is invariably conservative. But the rallying cry of every weak apologist for misogyny, not all men, deserves to be reversed. Ooh, so she just said, we don't hate men. She tried to play that off, right? But here she just said, it's a weak apologistic statement to say not all men. Which is literally true. It's not all men. Okay? If I'm in trouble, I want a man to save me from a man. A woman cannot save me that well from a man. Okay? If there's a crazy man on crack hallucinating, he's attacking me, I want a male cop. Okay? I don't want a woman who's fat, like a woman who was protecting Trump when he was blasted at in the Secret Service. She looked like Amy Schumer. You know, fat and overweight, out of shape. I want a stout, roided up beast that looks like Mike Tyson defending me. You know, that's what we need. So it's true that there are plenty of good men, but we don't highlight them. And do women reward that? No. Some don't. Not all men are shambling supplicants to their own biology. Not all men are incapable of change. When men do shitty things to women, they don't do it because that's the way men are, but because that's the way men feel. And men have been permitted very few ways to manage their emotions that are non-violent. That's not true. That's just not true, because you can manage your emotions. Well, there's nice violent video games, there's mixed martial arts, so it's violent, but it's about, like, who are you doing the violence on? Okay, and also recall that there are men who will go jogging, lift weights, they'll do horseback riding, go surfing, tons of stuff. Hiking, go to Mount Everest, do a mountain bike race, tons of stuff. Literally, they'll go bull riding. You know, there's like, men are just different in what they do. Within living memory, it was women, not men, who were assumed to be unstoppably, uncontrollably sexual. I'd say both are, but you can control. In the 19th century, it was the female sex drive that was supposed to be animalistic and in need of management. Everyone has to have that managed. By contrast, modern culture imagines women as a blank sexual canvas, erotic receptacles with no serious desires of their own. In fact, when women do feel desire, they are encouraged to treat it like every other hunger in their unruly bodies, as something dangerous, something that they need to stamp down on right away before it gets them into trouble. Yes, it is dangerous. You betcha. You betcha. A woman can be like, oh, I'm ovulating, so, like, I'm so into this guy right now. I met him on this app. I'm totally gonna meet up with him. Yeah, let's go get some cocktails. And then he's like, let's go back to my place. And then you get in there and he's like some weird Jeffrey Dahmer, like, da 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 da. Like, you should have thought. You should have thought. There's plenty of folk tales that show examples of when a man was foolish to trust a beautiful woman and when a woman was foolish to trust a handsome man. You know? That's the way it goes. I mean, come on now. Let's be real, shall we? Your sex drive can get you into big trouble. What was that? American Psycho? Patrick something something? I almost said Patrick McDavid. But it's Patrick something. He had money and status, and then the women he was courting, they went back, and then he did terrible things to them. Their lust drive literally got them executed. And in one of the examples, he's on top of the woman, and then he just starts shanking. Now that's fiction, but we do know that terrible things have happened to women when they just meet up with random strangers while they're drunk or high. And we also know that some men play the long game. You know, they're coy, And then once they get you behind closed doors, get you all liquored up, get you a blunt in your mouth, then that's when the mask comes off. Alright? Lust is always dangerous because it leads you astray. And you don't have sound judgment when your hormones are all over the place. As much as the natural fallacy excuses crimes against women, it utterly erases crimes against men and boys. If the behaviors common understood as masculine were really so natural, they would not have to be enforced with violence. That's not true. Something can be natural and enforced with violence. Chimpanzees, they use violence. It's natural and they use violence. How the hyena female keeps her group in line is through violence. How do tigers mark their instinctual territory? It's through violence, if you violate going into their area. How does the male rooster get on top of some of the chicken females? He's very violent, plucks her. What about when there's a sick chick? The other chickens, the mamas, they'll peck that little chick to death in order to get rid of him. You can see countless examples of when nature uses violence. And it's natural to be violent, I'd argue. It's way more difficult to have patience and steadfastness and to think before being impulsively violent. If you ever grabbed a puppy, and I used to do this, you grab them and then you pet them, but then you rub the opposite direction of the fur, and you like, the little puppy goes like, if it has some spunk, they got no teeth, but they play, and you're like, you know, it's a form of violence though. Like the dog, that is, the pup. They try to bite you, even though they ain't got no teeth. Like pit bull puppies, pretty violent pups, regardless of what you think about them. They love to bite. You know, come on, play. Like, they bite each other. Like, you may call that playful, but a pit bull's instinct, you know, is more towards violence. You just see how they play. You see what's natural towards the dogs by what they love to do. You know? I mean, a snake bites you. It's an act of violence, and it's something natural to them. And it's not enforced on the snake. The snake does it on its own. Does it on its own. The praying mantis eats the head off of its mate. That's the way things go. So I don't agree with that. If it were really so aberrant for little boys to be so gentle, to be emotionally expressive, these behaviors would not be terrorized out of them. Well, it depends on how emotional they're being, because the world, you have to be tough to survive. You really do. You can have mercy. You can have patience and empathy and understanding, but you have to be able to know when to put your emotions in check. If little boys became men automatically, they wouldn't need anyone to tell them to man up. That's not true. That's like if a little girl is being jealous, and you would say to her, hey, stop being jealous. A reminder. Everyone needs reminders. Even adults need reminders. If a man is being a whiny little cunt and he's not doing his job and you gotta check up on him, hey, fix it. Everyone needs someone to tell them something, but some children have a natural disposition of charisma and intellect. We all have different capabilities, right? No human is painted with the same slab of impulsive instincts. You get a lot inherited from your parents and also your surroundings. But there are commonalities we all share. It lets us take a look at the wreck of modern masculinity, shrug our shoulders and say, well, we found it like this. It was broken when we got here. The long-held presumption that violence, including violence, is an inevitable extension of male sexuality and a fundamental aspect of male identity is one of the most insidious lies currently holding the human species back from deeper healing. I was just thinking about, okay, so male violence in an intimate matter. She contends that it's an inevitable extension She thinks that's holding it back. She says it's an insidious lie. I don't know. I was looking again at World War II. There was a Russian guy. Maybe you can find it on YouTube. He said that his group, when the Germans had lost in World War II, the amount of German women who were R-worded was astounding. And he said he watched youths under the age of 18 be R-worded until they were bleeding, then they were blasted in the head, and they were thrown in a ditch, and it was a pigsty where the pigs are, and that when he went to look at them later, the pigs were eating them. And you can find this on YouTube. I think YouTube still allows it, because I was just looking at it the other day. You know, history should have an honest look. You can see that the amount of Germans who R-worded women, and how many of American troops and British troops, you know, and Russians R-worded German women after the war, there is no doubt. And then you look at how the Jays, how they, if you saw that very sad viral video where a Palestinian male was being R-worded by Zio soldiers, very heartbreaking, but how that was something. And then you look at how in male prisons R-wording is quite common. And so I started to think to myself, it is quite alarming how many men R-word as a weapon of war, and also for their own desires, sadly, you know. And then it's just something to be like, men have the capacity to use their male organs to cause immense harm, you know. And if you think about how men have to take pills to make their male member firm, and then you realize that the men who R-word are able, with all the screaming and sense and disruption of energy, are able to maintain that firmness, that would then show that they like that, which would then prove that that is part of their sexuality. So that would therefore then prove that there are some wicked men who have R-wording as their sexual behavior, and that that type of violence is part of their male identity, and is a fundamental aspect of who they are. Because actions speak louder than words, and through actions we see who you are. And your actions are part of your identifying traits. So I disagree with her there. I hope you understood my point. It's quite a morbid topic, to be honest. Social Darwinism repackaged man's inhumanity to man as a moral imperative. We tend to understand nature according to the socioeconomic norms of our age. And right now, the prevailing idea is that violence, racial injustice, and pitiless competition are not merely justified, but somehow a biological duty. I wouldn't say duty, I would say vice. Vice, you know, duty. I would say that there's always going to be tribalism and racial boundaries. I mean, I had a psychopath woman who said, because I'm mixed race and my children are mixed race, I'm not a racial purist. It doesn't appeal to me. And she said race mixture should be executed. And it should be made illegal. And it's like, are you crazy? Are you insane? So, it's 2024, and there's still people who think that people like me shouldn't really exist and that we're an abomination. I mean, Dr. Umar Johnson, he tells black men not to date white women. If that was the case, like my mom had children with black men, and my dad had children with black women. So if my mom and dad would have listened to Dr. Umar Johnson or their mates, then none of my siblings would exist. What are we talking about here? You know? But again, there are some people who are like, don't race mix. And I'm like, whatever. I'm gonna do what I want. I like Latinos. I marry Latinos. You know? It's a very interesting section. I don't agree with her assertions, as you will know. And I don't think that she has men's best interests at heart. She herself is not a heterosexual, so I find it quite bizarre that she wants to tell us heterosexual women and our men what they should be like. You know, she used this term neo-masculinist, and then she just was like frothing in over natural selection. Okay, she mentioned biological determinism, folk wisdom, sociobiology. She talked about shame, masculine posturing, self-hate. Very bizarre woman, I must say. I hope you learned something in terms of my point of view, and you know, we're learning more about what these feminists believe, as disturbing as it is, but we must take time to see what our opponents say so that we can create an accurate representation of who they are, so that we can come up with formidable rebuttals and solutions to what they see as rectifications, inshallah. May Allah guide us and protect us from the plague that is feminism, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect our women from following such people, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow the believers to have blessed marriages. Okay? Please like, comment, and subscribe. If you'd like to read more about what I write, you can do so by going to my blog at www.subscribestar.com/MilahanArchive. Hope to see you there.